Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Beckwith, and this is a Climate Emergency Forum video filmed live at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. And I have the pleasure to have a chat with Yonatan Neril. And basically, Yonatan is an interfaith environmental advocate, NGO director, and rabbi. He's the founder and current director of the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, ICSD, which is a nonprofit organization based in Jerusalem. Yonatan speaks internationally on religion and ecology, and you've spoken at the Davos Forum, the World Economic Forum. We go back a while with UN climate conferences, the Parliament of World Religions, dozens of houses of worship, and podcasts. Now, a really big thing is that in December 2023, you were co-organizer of the first ever Faith Pavilion at the UN climate conference COP28 in Dubai, which included 65 sessions with 325 speakers and was hosted by the Muslim Council of Elders. So we all live on one planet. You know, we have human-constructed borders, you know, for countries, different borders for religions, different borders for, you know, we put ourselves into groups, and, you know, we all have to get along together in order to address the common crisis of climate change. So Yonatan, can you please give us an idea for what you're hoping to accomplish at this COP with your Interfaith Pavilion?
Thank you for the warm introduction. So, as you point out, we have these artificially constructed borders because the borders on planet Earth are, well, you have rivers that form certain borders, and while some country borders relate to rivers, but many do not. And as you point out, we also have these differences of people based on religion and faith and ethnicity. So part of the work that we're doing around interfaith engagement at the COP is bringing people together based on an awareness that the other is a brother of a different mother, sister of a different mister. It's not about us versus them. It's about us and them and how we find common cause. So among the things that we're trying to accomplish here at COP we're going to be organizing a Indigenous peoples and faith leaders walk or event here in the center of the COP. That's going to bring together Indigenous figures and faith figures from many traditions who are together calling for ambitious climate action. Part of our work is based on the belief that the ecological crisis is a spiritual crisis. It's not about the birds and the bees, the trees and the toads. It's not just about them, but it's about the human being and how we live as spiritual beings in a physical reality. And so the climate crisis is not fundamentally just about carbon. It's about consciousness. And therefore, the focus has to be on addressing some of the spiritual roots, including greed, short-term thinking, arrogance, and replacing those with spiritual solutions like long-term thinking, caring for other people, humility, caring for other creatures. So my organization is involved in organizing or speaking on about 10 events here. Some of them are at the Faith Pavilion, which we initiated 2 years ago, and which we co-organized together with the Muslim Council of Elders and the UN Environment Program's Faith for Earth Coalition and the Episcopal Diocese of California. That the Faith Pavilion this year has 40 sessions with 200 speakers, and it is a beehive. It's buzzing and it's full to capacity with people attending the sessions. It's also available on live stream on the Faith Pavilion YouTube channel. So we're trying to also advocate and engage with country negotiators, bring religious figures into conversation with country negotiators to try to increase climate ambition at this COP.
Yes, this I think we probably first met in Lima, Peru, in 2014, or there. Maybe it was Paris. It was thereabouts, and I remember. That we talked about some of the. Some of the things that we wanted to accomplish at the COP. And I think, anyway, a big point of the Paris COP, like, it was considered a very successful COP and a landmark one, because it established that we don't want to go above 2 degrees Celsius, and we had great ambition to stay below 1.5. And here we are, almost a decade later, and the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, saying we're there. We're at 1.55 or 1.6 this year, and they're also saying that we're very likely to reach 2 degrees within, say, a decade or so. So things with climate have really, really accelerated, and we see this with the acceleration of extreme weather events, etc. So a lot of people, it's affecting a lot of people. Emotionally and spiritually, especially younger people. They're saying, well, what kind of future are we going to have? So how can we, if people get depressed and really upset, then they're not really that effective, right? So how do we instill more hope and positive messages in people, because we also have to be very realistic about what's happening with climate. So do you have some ideas on that?
You've asked me to put on my rabbi hat now. So I do wear a kippah, a yarmulke.
You've got it on already.
So well, it's a real question that you're asking, because as you mentioned, many millions and even hundreds of millions of people are experiencing climate anxiety, and that anxiety is real. I experience it myself, as do a number of clergy who then feel motivated to speak about this issue. So the anxiety does serve a purpose. The purpose of anxiety is to motivate us to change. The Dalai Lama said that if you're experiencing anxiety, well, then do something about something, and instead of just feeling the anxiety. And if there's nothing you can do about it, then don't feel the anxiety. But in this case, there is something that we can do about climate change. This is a problem that we've created and a problem that we can solve. So I was at a Sabbath meal in Montreal, actually, a number of years ago, when I was speaking at a synagogue there, and the parents of a teenage young woman came up to me, and they said how much their daughter is experiencing climate anxiety. And at her religious day school, the science teacher talked about climate change, and I said to her, well, is there a spiritual guide that is helping you with climate despair and climate anxiety? And unfortunately there wasn't. And I shared with her, and I'll share with you, a teaching from Chief Rabbi Yonatan Sachs, which is how I begin the book Eco Bible, which is an ecological commentary on the Hebrew Bible, which I co-authored. Rabbi Amorai asked, where is the Garden of Eden? He replied, it is on earth. And Rabbi Yonatan Sachs, of blessed memory, the former chief rabbi of Britain, said, hope is a human virtue, but one with religious underpinnings. At its ultimate, it is the belief that God is mindful of our aspirations, with us in our fumbling efforts, that God has given us the means to save us from ourselves, that we are not wrong to dream, wish, and work for a better world. Hope is the knowledge that we can choose, that we can learn from our mistakes and act differently next time. And so, in this way, hope is a little bit different than blind optimism. Because a lot of people in society have this blind optimism that technology is going to solve this climate crisis. And in fact, here at the COP, at COP29, and this is the 5th COP that I've been to, there's this idea that, somehow we're going to find some technology and sort of wave a magic wand, and it's going to solve our problems, and some techno billionaire is going to just deal with this issue. And maybe they're right, and I hope they're right. But if they're wrong, then we're going to have serious consequences that we're already experiencing. And actually, they have been wrong for the past 50 years since the environmental movement began and started, raising the alarm about our living out of balance on God's creation. So hope, as opposed to blind optimism, is this belief that God has given us the power to act. God has given us, in what in Hebrew is called seichel, which is spiritual intelligence, and we have the ability to live differently and to act differently. And but the key is to make that decision to take responsibility. So that is our hope, is that we can motivate billions of people. 85% of the human population is affiliates with a religion. That's 6.7 billion people. Yet most religious people today are not living sustainable lifestyles. And so therefore the challenge, and most religious people who vote in elections are not voting for candidates who are prioritizing climate action. In fact, many religious voters in many countries are voting for political candidates who oppose climate action, ironically. And so the challenge is, how do we motivate this core block of humanity who are religiously affiliated people to be climate champions and to live ecologically sustainable lives? That's the work that I'm engaged in and have been engaged in now for about 15 years.
Thank you. So I think, a key component is to educate people, like to let people know, that climate change is really, we're not just saying it's an emergency to try to, pull anything over on any people. I mean, a lot of people are living through this emergency. If you live in Spain, for example, you may have experienced torrential rains leading to horrendous flooding. If you live in the U.S. in the Appalachians, you may have experienced Hurricane Helene, basically swelling the river through your town so that, the town is basically destroyed. And this was considered a safe place from climate, a climate haven. In fact, people had moved there to the Appalachians from other places because it's higher elevation and lower temperatures, and they thought it was a climate haven. And I think the story is really that there is no climate haven. There's no. I mean, different places are maybe safer or more resilient to climate change than other places, but there's no place that you can go and say this is immune from climate change. I think that's one thing. But I think part of the trick is, or part of the not trick, but part of the thing we need to think about how to do is to get people not just to listen to what's happening, but to actually, as you say, take action. I mean, action is key, and there's so many different things that we can do. And it's not just taking action, but it's stopping actions that are actively harming the planet. I think that's also important, like slowing down, stopping deforestation, for example. We've overfished the oceans. There was huge amounts of carbon in life in the oceans, even like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that are just not there now. We've fished out 90% of the large marine creatures. So there's lots of. What I've noticed a big switch in this COP, in that there's a lot of scientists and other people talking about carbon dioxide removal, like how to maybe, whether it be through microalgae like phytoplankton or kelp beds, and the oceans are under huge stress, right? We're losing the coral reefs, which are biodiversity hotspots. So I think it's all about getting enough people, getting a critical mass of people to understand the problem, be concerned with it, and forcing political action. So I think the interfaith community, the idea of connecting all of the different religions so that they can understand the problem, and then bring the information to people that follow the particular religions involved, and this should reach vast numbers of people to eventually get like tipping points in human behavior or action on climate change. So is there, like, do you Have you looked in detail about the best way to get people to take action to help the planet on climate? Because you can't just tell people, recycle, do this, do that, because people don't like being told what to do, right? And we don't want to give up our lifestyles, if we're from relatively, well-to-do countries. So what can you help us sort of understand how we can motivate people to do the right thing as opposed to telling them to do the right thing?
Well, that's really the million-dollar question, is how do we motivate people to change? And how does humanity motivate itself to change? And that's part of the power of religious traditions, which are these age-old institutions and drawing on age-old sacred wisdom that humanity has received from the source of all being over the millennia about how to live on planet Earth. I mean, religion at its essence is about how to connect to the divine, how to show respect to other people and other creatures, how to forgive, how to generate love in one's heart, how to live at peace, and these are the spiritual technologies that we need today, because part of the runaway train of climate change is based on the mentality of capitalism that is focusing on maximizing profit, which is itself focused on maximizing greed, but also trying to deliver instant self-gratification in little capsules that food engineers have developed to essentially stimulate this dopamine rush in the human brain, whether it's through food or for luxury vacations, or through a big house or through scrolling on one's social media feed, and that consumption is what's driving the climate crisis, and that consumption is driven by the pleasure desire. But as one of my teachers taught, Rabbi Cohen, we are pleasure-seeking beings, but we have a decision about whether to choose to fulfill that pleasure-seeking through the physical or through spirituality, family, and community. Those are very different pleasures. It's very different pleasure to sit at a meal with family and community and to laugh in person than it is to watch some short video of a cat falling off a wall and have some artificial laugh, by oneself alone in one's room. And so, part of what, and there's actually been studies about climate communication, specifically with religious communities. And one of the things that they found is that it really depends on which religious community you're talking about. So, for example, to communicate about climate change with conservative evangelical Christians in the United States requires using language that emphasizing caring for God's creation. If one talks about the climate emergency, people may not resonate as well because the word climate change has become politicized in certain religious communities. But to talk about caring for one's neighbor and doing justice and loving one's neighbor, or to use language that Pope Francis talks about, of the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth. This is some of the language that religious figures are using to help motivate action at this time.
Yes, thank you. We're getting close, I think, to closing out here. I guess people ask me. I often get a lot of criticism for coming to COPs. I'm sure anybody coming to a COP gets similar criticism. Why are you burning all this fuel to fly here? How do you heat your home? We get all these questions that, we shouldn't do anything because we're all using fossil fuels, and we've used fossil fuels for century, and anything plastic we have may have fossil fuels going into it. Not so much now. We have a lot of plant-based plastics, but apart from going on perplexity.ai and asking it to respond to such a question, I mean, what do you tell people if a good friend of yours says, you're flying halfway across the world to a climate conference, how can you justify it? What do you tell them? And maybe if you have some other closing thoughts, you can let us know. But I tell them that it's connecting with people, right? I mean, it's connecting with people, it's meeting people, it's exchanging ideas. You can't do this on Zoom calls. You can't do this online. Like the human connection is vital for getting things done, in my opinion. So, I mean, what would you tell a friend who criticizes you for burning fossil fuels to come to this meeting? And do you have any other things that you want to speak about to as we close out this session?
I mean, I would say to such a friend that, first of all, I try to minimize my carbon footprint in general by eating a plant-based diet, not owning a vehicle other than my vegan-powered bicycle, and only travel a few times a year. So the climate COP plays an important function for humanity, and even it's now the 29th iteration of it, but it's really the one time of the year when people come together to focus on curbing climate change. And to say that people shouldn't come together because it's hypocritical. It is hypocritical at some level, but it's also necessary in order for us to curb climate change, even though we've yet to succeed through the COP. Now, you can make another argument that the COP is not effective, which is true, because each year that the COP has met, the emissions have increased. And that's a deeper question of why is the COP ineffective? And it's partly, as I mentioned, because of we've yet to shift. The tipping point has yet to happen from greed to interconnection. Now, I would just close off by sharing a short story that the Nobel laureate Toni Morrison told of a young boy who comes to an elder woman with a bird in his hands. And he says to the woman, "Can you tell me whether the bird in my hands is alive or dead?" And she thinks to herself, and she realizes that the boy is playing a trick on her. Because if she says the bird is dead, then he will open his hands and the bird will fly away and she will be wrong. And if she says the bird is alive, he will close his hands and crush the bird and she will again be wrong. He's got her coming and going. So she thinks to herself for a minute and she says to the young boy, "I don't know whether the bird in your hands is alive or dead. All I know is that the life of the bird is in your hands." And so the message I want to leave you with is that each of us has power. Each of us has agency, and each of us has responsibility. Descartes said, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. But Rabbi Soloveitchik said, "I am, therefore I am responsible." And each of us, at this critical, pregnant moment in history, when everything hangs in the balance, this moment that our ancestors have been dreaming about for thousands of years, each of us, no matter what our profession is, has to take the responsibility and to do everything in our power. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said that Noah of Noah's Ark is an archetypal figure, meaning he is an example for each of us. Each of us is Noah, and each of us has the responsibility at this moment to do everything in our power to save humanity and all species for this generation and for future generations. May God bless us in our efforts.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful chat, Yonatan. And I wish to just thank everybody that is viewing Climate Emergency Forum. And please follow us, and please try to convey this message that we're bringing to you far and wide by sharing and talking with friends. Probably more importantly is, I say share. Go, next time you're at a big dinner conversation, just bring up this idea and talk about it with people one-on-one, person to person, in a room, not over social media, not over anything else. We have to get this human contact back with people and which, we've been getting away from it a bit, I think. I mean, I notice I walk through these hallways and I often see people just tied up with their phones. I go into the washroom and people are in the washroom and they're looking at their phones while they're doing their business. And it's just like it's like an addiction to this technology. And we need to be more human, I think, to solve the climate issue. So thank you, everybody, and thanks again, Yonatan. Okay, bye for now.